Hello, in this broadcast, Time, the information program from the television channel Ostankino. In the Chechen Republic, heightened combat activities continue. Forces of the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Defense are completing blockade of Grozny, and the tactics of Dudayev's supporters is gradually shifting into a regimen of partisan war. His commandos are launching significant blows to rear parts of regiments which have surrounded the capital of Chechnya. In search of war and peace, today was spent by the federal forces and the formations resisting them and supporting the rebel retired General Dudayev. Two large regiments of commandos with a number of around 1,200 people, fortified with combat technology, artillery and grenade launchers, attended in the area of Argun to surround a group of Russian military. The ambush attempt was decisively stifled. Border troops, jointly with units of the internal forces of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Russia, have fully sealed off the border between the Chechnya Republic and Dagestan. The commanders of the unlawful militarized groups have demanded that relatives of Dudayev be returned to Grozny and his closest allies to participate in combat action. The Temporary Information Center reported that since the beginning of combat, 44 military personnel have died and 116 soldiers and officers have been injured. Our correspondents report from Grozny that on the military strategic objects of the capital of Chechnya, missile bomb attacks continue to be launched. The Temporary Information Center reports that to Mozdok, 28 wagons with initial humanitarian aid to the peaceful population of the Chechnya Republic have arrived, and also to Mozdok, aviation has delivered almost 400 tons of emergency humanitarian aid. The Ministry of Emergency Situations of Russia has sent into the region children's food, dry foods, cans, grains, and medications. Our correspondent in the zone of the Chechnya conflict, Mikhail Zotov, has just delivered video material on today's situation in Grozny and around it, and when this material is ready, we will show it. This evening, the Minister of Defense of Russia, Pavel Grachov, arrived from Mozdok to Moscow. Currently, still in Mozdok are the Vice Premier of the Government of Russia, Nikolai Egorov, the Minister of Internal Affairs, Viktor Yedin, and the Director of the FSK, Sergei Stepashin. The number of forced resettlers from Chechnya, according to the Immigration Service, has approached 22,000. But if in the first days of conflict daily to adjacent areas of Chechnya up to 700 people arrived, yesterday they were only 172. The flow of refugees has been influenced by the complicated situation. Majority of refugees are forced to escape by foot from conflict areas, but no matter how many refugees, prepared to aid them are immigration services of Russia and medical workers. About their work and combat activities, our special correspondent Natalia Prokofyeva reports. We arrived at the military airport in Mozdok on a Ministry of Emergency Situations plane which brought humanitarian cargo, medications, equipment, a brigade of doctors and nurses from the 4 largest Moscow clinics which have replaced their colleagues in the hospital of the Russian Center of Medical Catastrophe and Defense. These are civilians, not military personnel. Is it true that our medical workers are forbidden to aid those that are on the Dudayev side? Honestly speaking, such a statement is probably more reminiscent of a provocation, and a careless provocation, I would say. No one ever in our daily lives, nor here, were never asked for documents from someone needing assistance. In the 1970s, when such a complex developed in the complex of medical biological problems, and then called a field laboratory, our lesser brothers were received from the biological satellites, later cosmonauts, then Chernobyl, Armenia, Beslan, Nazran. The field laboratory was re-equipped into a military field hospital. We can lower it on the site on a navigated cargo platform. The medicated catastrophe units work in close cooperation with the Ministry of Emergency Situations. All decisions are made by the commander, the Pleasant General, Sergei Mikhailovich Kudinov. Today, the 2 helicopters, in which were doctors and 2 tons of medical aid, were sent to Pskov, where a flood of refugees is headed. 2 convoys with humanitarian aid, 60 and 70 tons, escorted by a military convoy, have left for Chechnya. The Ministry of Social Security of Russia decided to organize collection of funds in order to support the victims of the Chechnya conflict. Offers to provide monetary aid come constantly from commercial structures, including foreign ones, and from private individuals. Therefore, the ministry is opening a special account for social support for the Chechnya victims and guarantees immediate transfer of those funds from that account for specified aims. The State Duma of Russia today adopted a statement in which it has appealed to the President and the government and also to the conflicting sides in the Chechnya Republic with a proposal to immediately impose a moratorium on all combat in Chechnya. The discussions, statement, and appeal of the State Duma in connection with the situation in Chechnya was so turbulent that they had to be voted on repeatedly. The deputies, in a semi-polemic state, didn't manage to have time to press the buttons. As of tomorrow, the Federative Council and the Duma are going on 2 weeks holiday, and I fear very much that during that time the most tragic events will occur. That is, an attempt at a forceful resolution of the problem in Chechnya with the storming of Grozny. The State Duma continues to receive reports from the authorized humanitarian rights representative Sergei Kovalov about air raids on Grozny and deaths of citizens. A group of deputies from the Duma today held a consultation in the Federative Council with Ramazan Abdullah-Tipov in connection with the appeal to the Federal Assembly and the chairman of the Parliament of Chechnya. The issue is to continue peaceful dialogues, one of the aspects of which, in the opinion of deputies, could be an agreement to divide powers between the center and the Republic. The delegation could include, as the leader of the communists, Gennady Zyuganov, mentioned, would be representatives of government, parliament, individual republics within the framework of Russia. I feel that now the time has come when each person has to answer the question. Either there will be a big war or we'll manage to stop this insanity in its initial phases. I presume that there is a program of several points which would allow us a dignified solution out of this dead end for all warring sides. At the press conference after the work of the session, the chairman of the State Duma, Ivan Rybkin, noted, unfortunately, at times, the word peace is extinguished by the thunder of cannons when it's no longer possible to persuade. The opinion of the subjects of the Russian Federation on actions of federal authorities in Chechnya are varied. The peoples of the Ural, Buryatia, feel that events in Chechnya threaten the wholeness of the Russian Federation. The Legislative Assembly of Karelia condemns the involvement of the army in resolving internal problems of the Russian state. The National Council of the Karchaeva-Cherkessk Republic urges Russian leadership to reject the use of military force in Chechnya. And in the statement of the Murmansk Committee of Reforms, it says that the deployment of Russian forces in Chechnya is not a violation of the Constitution. In the assessment of the actions of Russian authorities by the international community, as previously, the position of non-interference in the internal affairs of the country prevails. The UN Secretary-General Boutros Boutros-Ghali stated that the regularization of the affairs in Chechnya is an internal matter of Russia. In the interview to the television company CNN, Boutros-Ghali again emphasized that it's in the interest of the international community to help Russia because the disintegration of the Russian Federation will affect all the countries of the former Soviet Union and even the Eastern European countries. Today, on behalf of the Conciliatory Commission under the President of Russia, Dmitry Rurikov met with the press. And since he is the aide of the President on international affairs, the discussion involved basically international aspects of such a purely internal Russian issue as the conflict in Chechnya. And this was the assessment of the Chechen events abroad. In the opinion of Rurikov, foreign countries have a basis for this. First of all, if one supports foreign separatists, soon complications could arise with their own. Secondly, the Dudayev regime was not recognized by a single government of the world. Incidentally, poor foreign correspondents are confused by the decision of the Supreme Soviet on the illegitimacy of the Dudayev regime. They can't seem to understand why some resolutions recognize it as legitimate and others not. This is naive. Incidentally, Dmitry Rurikov preferred to avoid this question. In any case, he noted Dudayev is illegitimate because the elections were held with violations of the law. Those foreigners scared by Saddam are concerned with the Islamic factor, but in the opinion of Rurikov, there is no serious basis for concern. The Islamic Conference recently officially condemned terrorism and extremism, and although in Chechnya recently foreign commandos were seized, Russia has no basis to complain to the authorities of those countries, although Dudayev's legion of foreigners could grow. Rurikov stated that in some countries, millions of dollars are being collected and training camps are being organized. But near and distant countries of the world are still worried over the Chechnya conflict and express a desire for the immediate resolution with as few casualties as possible. Russian authorities are striving to do this as soon as possible with as few casualties as possible. The Fund in Defense of Glasnost confirmed today the fact of the death in Grozny of an American photojournalist, Cynthia Elbaum, the 27-year-old employee of the Time magazine. Since the beginning of December, this is the first case of a death of a journalist in Chechnya, yet during the conflict, more than 40 cases of violations of professional rights of journalists have been recorded. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia again urged all correspondents to leave the zone of the Chechen conflict. The strategy of mass media in illuminating regional and national policies was discussed at a special session in Maikop. The capital of Adygea, Maikop, was chosen as the site for the meeting, not by coincidence. The situation in this northern Caucasus republic is completely stable. This was reminded to the personal correspondents of Itartas, many of whom have to work in hot points, in opening the session by the President of the Republic of Adygea, Islam Sharima. And again, he offered his readiness to suggest Maikop, if they express an agreement with this, to the participants of the dialogue on overcoming the crisis in Chechnya. The word of the journalist could in itself influence events, and in regions gripped by military conflicts, fighting is even more severe, and therefore representatives of the fourth power, apart from reliable information and objectivity, must have a clear angle of view on events and their perspectives. Together with the journalists discussing the strategy of the information agency in illuminating regional and national policies were members of the Presidential Council, Andronik Migranyan, the chairman of the Committee on CIS Affairs of the State Duma, Konstantin Zatulin, and heads of the Adygeian Republic. Balance and objectivity and restraint of emotions, in my view, are very important today, and at the same time not to lie and not to distort information. And now, the report from our special correspondent Mikhail Zotov, who has just returned from Grozny, from the zone of the Chechen conflict. Last night, bombings of Grozny continued till 3 a.m. At almost 1300 hours, the city endured another raid. Air blows, just as yesterday, were dealt on residential quarters with casualties among the population. In the city, a large number of Russian families remain, whom no one is forcing to stay, but unlike the Chechens, who have relatives outside the republic itself, they have no place to go. The only road for refugees from Grozny is open. The president of Ingushetia, Ruslan Alshev, admonished today the heads of the administrations of all Caucasus regions to gather Sunday in Nazran to attempt to agree on ceasing the missile and bomb attacks. The Temporary Information Center under the government of Russia stated today that on the territory of Afghanistan, special points are operating to recruit volunteers from the Mujaheds to be deployed in Chechnya. At these points, specialists from Arab countries are employed. From only one such recruiting center to the territory of Chechnya, several hundreds of people have been dispatched. The press service of the government stated that in attempting to cross the border with Azerbaijan, one of the active members of the famous criminal gang, the Grey Wolves, was detained. He was headed for Grozny on invitation of the leaders of the unlawful militarized formations. On the territory of Abkhazia, there are no military bases to prepare Chechen gunmen for Chechnya. This was stated by the leader of the Republic, Vladislav Ardin, but today he said that not one person was sent by organs of state rule of Abkhazia to participate in combat in Chechnya, and yet the head of Georgia, Edvard Shevardnadze, has issued instructions for urgent measures to be undertaken to tighten patrol of the borders of Georgia in connection with attempts at insurgents by Abkhazian commandos en route to Chechnya. The document Shevardnadze signed provides for urgent measures to be undertaken, even organizing voluntary regiments on the border regions. The resignation of the speaker ended today's session of Georgian parliament. It all began with the absence of the heads of force ministries and departments who had been invited to the session. The chairing, Vakhtan Gugwaze, read to the parliamentarians a letter signed by the Minister of Defense, the Minister of Internal Affairs, the head of the Security Services, and the Prosecutor General, where it was stated that they were prepared to respond in writing to written questions of deputies. However, they couldn't participate in the meeting because they're occupied with more important matters. This letter evoked the turbulent reaction in the hall and criticism of the speaker, who couldn't ensure the presence of representatives of the force ministries. Certain deputies even questioned the authenticity of the letter which was read. After lengthy debates, Vakhtan Gugwaze suddenly announced his resignation and left the session's auditorium. The reason for the absence at the session of the heads of force ministries was probably the decree of Edvard Shevardnadze, whose content was partially revealed to the press by the head of the apparatus of the head of state, Valuz Hipanidze. In connection with events occurring in Chechnya, unlawful military formations existing in Abkhazia are attempting to cross the border with the Russian Federation. After lengthy and arduous discussion over the course of several days, the draft law of the federal budget for 1995 was adopted today by the State Duma of Russia in this first reading. This means that the chamber agreed with the concept of social economic development of the country for the next year proposed by the government. The first Vice Premier of Russia, Anatoly Chubais, held a briefing today for journalists where he gave his assessment of the Duma's decision. The essence of what happened today is the adoption of the government's concept for the development of the Russian economy in 1995, a concept which was submitted by the government back in the autumn of this year. And while we were reworking, we considered a significant number of comments, proposals, and objections of the deputies, and I'd like to emphasize that in particular. For me, it's important that all these clarifications of the budget did not change its essence, and we didn't reject the main objective of the budget and all financial policies for the next year, the aims which we formulate simply to stop the growth in prices. The level of the average monthly inflation, which is embedded in the ratified budget in the first reading, is between 2.5% to 3% per month. The growth of prices in 1995, as indicated in the budget and all the economic policy based on that budget, must be stopped. An explosion destroyed a pipeline feeding gas from Uzbekistan to Kyrgyzia and Kazakhstan today. The accident threatened cancellation of fuel supply to both those republics. However, ITRTASS reports that gas workers of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan in a few hours restored the pumping of fuel along circumventing arteries. The reasons for the explosion for now are not clear. On this backdrop, in Kyrgyzia, the 60th anniversary of the energy system of the republic was celebrated. On the days of the energy workers for the famous Taksabulsk Cascade hydroelectrical station gave a record yield. An agreement was signed between Kyrgyzia and Kazakhstan that Kazakhstan in the next 15 years will consistently supply the market consuming electrical power. There's an agreement with Pakistan as well. There, they are also prepared to buy 5 billion kilowatt hours. This will defrost work on the unique Kombaratiysk gas terminal. But probably the most amazing feature of the Norilsk hydroelectrical cascade are not the turbines or platinas, but the construction team itself, who continue to launch new aggregates no matter what, and instead of money for this, they're paid with such coupons. Incidentally, these papers, the deputy director of Norangas Gaz Dulneva, and hence the nickname Dulkas, are converted at the local bazaar, and mostly because faith in the honest word of the hydro constructors has been preserved. As promised, they are completing mounting of the latest turbine of the Shemoldisaysk gas terminal. At today's trading at the Moscow Interbank Currency Exchange, the rate of the dollar was 3,476 rubles, which is higher than yesterday's indicator by 22 points. Very soon, arriving in our stores for groceries, we won't have to dig in our wallets looking for cash. They will be replaced by the usual plastic cards in the dimensions of a business card. Such a new type of services for the population appeared recently in Volgograd with the aid of the company Vershina Mira. The cashier tallies the total of purchases, data is entered into an electronic device, and all you have to do is to slide your card through a slot, and everything is paid for. It's quick and convenient. The initiator for this entire system was the Russian house Selinga. In developing the system, we plan to implement it in all cities of Russia where the RDS has its branches, and more than that, we plan already to apply the system abroad. By such an electronic means, one may be able to pay for telephone conversations, pay one's tab in restaurants and hotels and at gas stations, and buy airline tickets. If the card itself is lost, it can be replaced quite easily, and a stranger will never be able to use it because the personal code is known only to the card holder. Another 1,000 automobiles will be received by stockholders of the Automobile Pan-Russian Alliance. In Moscow, another pre-New Year drawing was held for the cars. Unlike any others, we never promised extremely high dividends, and we never made promises which we couldn't keep. Overall, among the stockholders, 100,000 vehicles will be drawn, which was provided by the largest founder of the alliance, the Volga automobile plant. For the money of the shareholders, it's planned to build a new auto plant in Taliati. The uniqueness of the project is that for the first time in our country, such a major plant will be financed without any funds from the state budget. President Yeltsin defined today the order for financing radiation hazardous productivity centers. Their list must be ratified in 1 month. The government is instructed to provide uninterrupted financing of work executed at similar facilities with obligatory advances toward expenditures at 40% of the annual volume of budget allocations. This is one of the surviving descendants of the ancient fish, possibly was one of our progenitors because it, billions of years ago, crawled onto land and became a mammal. It turns out that its individual representatives still live in the Indian Ocean. It was fished out by our scientists back in the 1960s, just as these deep-water inhabitants with an unfriendly gaze. Today, to organize an expedition into warm and cold seas for employees of the Institute of Oceanology is too expensive. 2 months of voyage will cost $600,000, and not to sail is expensive as well. The Academy of Sciences today has 5 ships, and for each day they're idle, one must pay 500,000 rubles. Therefore, the heads of the Institute was not surprised by the telegram from the Gish division to determine the region of the sinking of our 3 ships. There's no money for mooring, and if the storms toss the ships out on shore, that could lead to human casualties. 137 million was sent to Gilinshik. It's good that the Ministry of Emergency Situations paid on time for the work conditions on the submarine Komsomolets. And if not the Ministry of Emergency Situations, the Institute would have closed. But today, because of financing, it develops new devices of the new generation, which could monitor the radionuclide and chemical pollution of our seas, and miniature transmitters use low levels of energy and once a week transmit to through satellites to the Earth. According to the director, the academic Vinogradov, soon such devices will be installed near the submarine Komsomolets. Moreover, elements in the Baltic Sea, which were not used during the war, and chemical warheads, when they begin to emit substances no one knows, and many of the seas are dumps of radioactive and chemical garbage. On this map, it's shown that the Ogarskaya Sea has not a single live area, and so the scientific oceanologists are fulfilling social orders, and no scientific work is done, only joint expeditions paid for by rich foreigners. For specialists from abroad, this is an opportunity to discover something new. For ours, to look into the live eyes of oceanic inhabitants and not these specimens formaldehyded back in the 1960s. Russia and the United States in principle agreed to provide to each other in 1995 secret information on volumes and levels of their nuclear arsenals. This was reported by the Washington Post today. A detailed proposal on this account was given by the American Vice President Albert Gore during his visit to Moscow. One of the reasons for such an agreement could possibly be the need to curtail international nuclear contraband, an extremely dangerous crime of the international mafia. Representatives of the Ministry of Internal Affairs called the contraband shipment of uranium discovered in the last few days by Czech special services. They unconditionally had precise information when on Argentina Street in Prague, they stopped a completely mundane car with 3 passengers. On the back seat of the automobile, there were 2 metal containers, the size of the usual coffee thermoses, in which there was almost 3 kilograms of radioactive material. Laboratory analysis indicated that this was highly enriched uranium number 235. It can be produced only in a few countries of the world. Evidently, this product was from Russia, which was proven by the accompanying certificate, which was printed in Russian and confirming that within the container there was uranium 235 enriched to 90%. The use of such material, experts confirm, can be only one, a military purpose. In Prague, they presume that the dangerous cargo was intended for one of the countries of Asia or the Middle East. Incidentally, the value of the seized uranium was hundreds of millions of dollars. Currently, police are interrogating the 3 arrested suspects. One of them is a Czech who formerly was employed in nuclear physics. 2 others are citizens of the former USSR. Their names for now are not divulged. By Czech law, if found guilty, they could receive up to 15 years in prison. The Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia was appointed today. He is the special envoy, Yuri Dubinin. In an official document which arrived from the apparatus of the President of the Government of Russia, henceforth it says the Russian Foreign Policies Department will be permitted 10 Deputy Ministers of Foreign Affairs, including 2 First Deputies. The Press Secretary of the President of Russia, Vyacheslav Kostikov, was recommended by the panel of the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs to be the official representative of Russia in the Vatican. But according to the Constitution, diplomatic representatives in foreign countries from Russia Russia is appointed by the president, and there is no decree from the head of state to appoint Vyacheslav Kostikov for now. During the official visit of the Prime Minister of Russia, Viktor Chernomyrdin, to India, 7 documents have been signed in order to enhance the trade, economic, science, technological, and cultural ties. Today, one may already acknowledge the visit of Viktor Chernomyrdin to India as a success. Agreement has been achieved on several issues, which will permit not only to achieve, but at least bring closer the trade economic relations to the level of 1990, and mostly in the area of military technical cooperation. Traditionally, India was one of the main partners of the Russian defense industry. 60% of its army has been equipped with Russian weapons. However, the economic break from 1991 to 93 turned off the oxygen. The loss to both sides resulted, and the agreement, which takes effect immediately, will allow our country to receive not several, but at least $5 billion. This concerns deliveries of military bombers MiG-29s, creating a repair base, and even a licensed production facility for weapons for third world countries. At one time, the inefficient economic mechanism led to losses of potential profit, and only our shuttle dealers caused damage to the country of $500 million. And hundreds of Indian businessmen who were visiting Russia could not find reliable firms for cooperation. Mutual guarantees between the countries, according to the Premier, will allow to increase trade turnover at least by 2 times in the near future. Also, an agreement was signed on trade shipping, cooperation in space study, and the area of information. And one more note. The members and the level of the state delegation from Russia was to demonstrate, and did do that to the Indian side, that Russian interests have not shifted to the West. The Muslim government of Bosnia-Herzegovina has agreed today with the proposal of the Bosnian Serbs on a ceasefire between the Serbs and the Muslim forces from 1400 hours Saturday, the 24th of December. Details of the agreement are reported by our special correspondent Vladimir Solovyov. Today at noon, on the entire territory of Bosnia-Herzegovina, an agreement was to take effect for a 4th-month ceasefire in which the Bosnian Serbs and Muslims agreed to, with the mediation of the American ex-president Jimmy Carter. The commanders of the 2 armies yesterday ordered all their units to cease fire at exactly noon. And truly, on the majority of the fronts currently snowed under, military technology is silent. However, the truce agreement was not signed today. The special envoy of the UN Secretary General Isusi Akashi, shuttling between Sarajevo and Pali, through the entire day attempted to regularize mutual complaints and claims of sides. Muslims did not withdraw their troops from the protection zone on Mount Igman in the suburbs of Sarajevo. Serbs agreed to wait for another 2 days and signed their part of the agreement. Officially, the ceasefire will take effect in 1 day after the agreed-upon limit. That means tomorrow at midday, as it usually happens before the beginning of each major truce in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and this time there were provocations. 2 shells exploded yesterday at a market in the center of the Muslim part of Sarajevo. 2 people were killed and 7 injured. And who was responsible? As usual, no one will probably ever find out. Despite the many problems, political, strategic, and meteorological, both warring sides evidently are definitely ready for a truce. Israel and Palestine have agreed on a partial withdrawal of troops from the west bank of the Jordan River. The sides have reached a compromise on a more serious problem, the redislocation of Israeli troops in that zone, before the beginning of Palestinian general elections. The situation has escalated in the south of Lebanon. Gunmen of the Islamic resistance today attacked posts of the Israeli army in the occupied security zone several times. These actions were made in response to the explosion in Beirut, as a result of which 20 people were either killed or injured. In response, Israeli aviation conducted a raid on South Lebanon territory. The President of Italy began today consultations to appoint a new prime minister instead of the recently resigned Silvio Berlusconi. The president has implied that he does not support the idea of Berlusconi to hold early presidential elections in the country. For 9 months, the cabinet of Silvio Berlusconi stayed in power, and now, upon the end of that term, in Italy, another government crisis has erupted. In almost full membership, the government tendered its resignation, and the same was done by the prime minister, who could not fulfill a single pre-election promise. His popularity wasn't increased by his younger brother, Paolo. Yesterday, he was sentenced to 7 months in prison, accused of bribing prominent political figures. In the opinion of certain observers, the Berlusconi phenomenon is involved in the fact that he, being an owner of a powerful television radio company and managing during his pre-election campaign, won the votes of constituents through his high-class advertising managers. The success of the broad ad campaign of Berlusconi and his personal popularity is confirmed by the public opinion poll. More than 50% of Italians want him to head the new government. And yet, currently, several candidacies are emerging for the post of Prime Minister. Francesco Cossiga, the former president of Italy. The collapse of the cabinet is not the best Christmas present, but one remembers the chant of Italian soccer fans who, despite anything, always repeat, "Italy is strong and it will win." Winter has come, and together with it the holidays, Christmas and New Year's. In Finland, by tradition, children are visited by Santa Claus in a red suit. In our country, Grandfather Frost. The path is a long one, but by Christmas, good Grandfather Frost promises to try and make it. In Rio de Janeiro, the world's largest Christmas bell was erected. Its height is 47 meters, its diameter is 20 meters, and its overall weight of the construction is 120 tons. It's illuminated by 770,000 colored lamps. And the bell was installed near the largest Latin American trade center in order to attract customers and also to get into the Guinness World Book of Records. Suitable also for the World Book of Records is the original Christmas concert staged in the city Curitiba in the south of Brazil. Instead of a proper stage, they use windows of an enormous house which looks like a lit-up Christmas tree. And on its roof, 10-meter-tall Santa Claus and his aged wife played here, who here in Brazil are called Papa and Mama Noel, and in our language, Father and Mother Christmas. In the skies, angels fluttered about at that time. Soon the New Year cheer will grip us all. Ahead, there are 2 days of the weekend, and we'll be able to prepare well for the holidays. All the best. Good evening. The speed skaters Oksana Vavilova from Irkutsk and Sergei Kilivchenin from Barnaul and Nizhny Novgorod today became the champions of Russia in the sprinters competitions. Ahead are still 3 days of those competitions. The medals must be won in the classical competitions as well. At the Russian Volleyball Men's Championships, after yet another round, Iskra Odintsov and Automobilist from St. Petersburg are in the lead. Also, the 6 teams are known who will continue the competition for the award. The most successful offense soccer player in Europe for now is Arsimutenkov, but in Russia the championships have ended, and therefore the best attackers of other countries have a good chance to catch up with him. You see how this was done successfully by the Chilean Samarano, playing for the Madrid Real in the match against Valladolid, where Real won 5-0 and Samarana scored 2 times. This season of the National Basketball Association continues. More victories were held by the leaders Orlando, Phoenix, and Utah. And we've often shown you small basketball miracles performed by the best masters, and here's one more of the most effective of all from what we've seen. And you see, these tricks are enjoyed not only by the viewers, but by our lesser brothers. And in conclusion about the coming interesting event, Kamaz Master and television company Ostankino present the New Year's auto racing adventure. From the 1st to the 15th of January, the grandiose marathon Paris, Grenada, Dakar. In the 17th Dakar, there is a record number of Russian racers and mechanics, and for the first time, special correspondents of the television company Ostankino. Good evening. Warm Atlantic air will bring some warming to the entire territory of Europe. In the Baltic countries, in the northwestern region, in the Leningrad district and the Arkhangelsk district, in Karelia and the Kola Peninsula, in a zone of an atmospheric front which has shifted down into this area from Scandinavia, it's cloudy with isolated spots of rain with blizzards, temperatures from +1 to -4. It will also be cloudy in the Nenetsk Autonomous District, in the Republic of Komi and the Volgovatsk region. Snow is possible, and on the coast, blizzards. Temperatures during the night and day, -3 to 8 in the northeast of Komi, -10 to 15 degrees. Under the influence of the warm Atlantic air, in the central and central Chernozem area, and in Belarus, it will be cloudy with patches of snow during the day, -2 to 7 degrees. In the central Chernozem area, -10 to 15. Ukraine, Moldova will be under the influence of an anticyclone, which is shifting into this area from the west of Europe. Therefore, here it is partly cloudy, but without precipitation. Temperatures -3 to 8 in Moldova, around 0. The same weather is expected in the Rostov district over the central and lower Volga. But here it's colder. During the day, -10 to 15. In the Rostov district, -4 to 9. In the Stavropol and Krasnodar Rim areas, partly cloudy skies with brief periods of precipitation. Temperatures from -4 to +1. In the Stavropol Rim, -5 to 10. On the Black Sea coast of the Krasnodar region, rain is possible. Temperatures +10 to 15 degrees. The weather of the republics of the Northern Caucasus will be influenced by a warm atmospheric front. In the Chechen Republic, it's cloudy with patches of snow. Temperatures from -4 to 6 degrees. In Dagestan, partly cloudy skies during the day, -8 to 10. In the south of the republic, brief rains. Temperatures +1 to 3 degrees. Northern Ossetia and Ingushetia will have cloudy skies with isolated patches of precipitation. Danger of snow slides in the mountains, -7 to 9. Beyond the Caucasus, as previously, cloudy with brief isolated precipitation during the day, +1 to 6. In Armenia, it's around 0 degrees. In St. Petersburg, cloudy skies with brief snows at night, -2 to 4, during the day, around 0. In Moscow, cloudy with isolated snow at night, -6 to 8, during the day, -2 to 4. In the south, from -6 to -8 degrees. On Sunday, the weather will not change much. It will still be cloudy with some isolated precipitation during the day, -1 to 3, but we hope that that will not ruin your good mood on the weekend.